So, looks like someone's looking to tap into some serious inner peace and bliss, huh?
Sounds like it.
And their sources on Tantric Buddhism seem like the perfect place to start. We've got, let's see, excerpts from a book called Great Bliss, Tantric Sex, and the Path to Inner Awakening.
Wow, that's quite a title.
It is, isn't it? And then we've got some more academic papers to balance things out a bit. So, ready to dive into a world of ancient wisdom, powerful deities, and maybe even, wait for it, sacred sex.
Let's do it.
All right, let's go. This book jumps right in. So Tantra's all about this idea of blending seemingly opposing energies, male, female, sex, spirit, like the everyday world and the sacred.
Yeah, I see that. It's about embracing both sides of the coin.
Right, exactly. For wholeness and ultimately for happiness. It even suggests that something like even eating can become a pathway to bliss with the right kind of awareness.
Instead of rejecting the world and its pleasures, it suggests we can find enlightenment by embracing them. It's our own misconceptions that create suffering.
Oh, interesting.
The clinging, the aversion, the idea that the world is inherently bad.
So rather than denying your desires, Tantra says, try to understand them, work with them, transform them.
Exactly.
I'm already hooked. But before we get into the how-to of all that, let's go back in time a minute. This book mentions that Tantra has these ancient origins, maybe even going back like 150,000 years.
Right.
Yeah, it suggests that early humans actually lived with this more holistic consciousness, where life and spirit were just like interconnected. Like, imagine celebrating the world with all your senses as a way to connect with the sacredness of existence.
That's what Tantra aims to recapture.
Right. Things obviously changed at some point, though. The book talks about this great reversal around 2000 BCE, where suffering kind of became like a major focus in a lot of the spiritual narratives. What do you think shifted?
Well, I think as civilizations got more complex, life did too. The focus shifted from celebration to dealing with the tough stuff, death, disease, social injustice, and a lot of spiritual traditions started viewing the world as a source of suffering. And liberation was all about transcending those earthly desires.
And that's where this whole tantric rebellion comes in, right?
It's like they're saying, hold on, the world is full of incredible beauty and pleasure. Can't we use that to grow spiritually?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, let's use the world's beauty and pleasure to fuel our spiritual growth.
It's a pretty radical shift in perspective.
It is, yeah. The book mentions this group called the Vajrayas. Who were they and what's their connection to all this?
The Vajrayas, described in the Atharva Veda, were kind of like an early tantric sect. They worshiped these ecstatic gods, practiced sacred sex rituals, and even Kundalini yoga.
Wow, okay.
So they're a link to that ancient tradition of embracing life's energies, including sexual energy, for spiritual awakening.
I see. So while these other paths preached renunciation, Tantric Buddhists were saying, hey, hold on, let's use this stuff, all this amazing stuff.
Exactly. It's about harnessing those powerful energies for transformation.
Right. Okay, so to understand how it works, we need to look at the 4 yogas. These are the core practices of Tantric Buddhism.
They're the engine driving this vehicle toward enlightenment.
Okay, so before we get too deep into the yogas themselves, what exactly do they involve? I mean, I'm familiar with yoga as, stretching and breathing, but this sounds a bit different.
Right. Yoga, in this context, actually means union.
Oh, okay.
And it refers to these practices that are meant to unite your individual consciousness with ultimate reality.
I see.
So each of the 4 yogas uses specific techniques to achieve that goal.
So it's not just about physical flexibility. It's about uniting your inner world with this ultimate reality.
Exactly. It's a much deeper and more profound approach to yoga.
That's a really powerful concept. Okay, let's start with Deity Yoga. What's the deal with all the deities in Tantric Buddhism? There are a lot of them.
There are. Think of them as these archetypes of wisdom, love, and power. They're emanations of that ultimate reality that we can connect with to access those qualities within ourselves.
So you're not worshiping them for favors like you might with some traditional gods.
No, not exactly. It's not about petitioning them for things.
Okay.
Deities are more like tools for inner transformation. If you visualize them, you recite their mantras, and you identify with their qualities.
So you're trying to embody those qualities through this deep connection with the deity.
Exactly. It's almost like method acting for spiritual awakening.
I like that. Okay, so the book mentions different types of deities, though. What's the difference between a pledge deity and a wisdom deity? How would someone even choose one?
That's a great question. So Imagine the pledged deity is your kind of like your starting point. It's the deity you connect with initially to begin your praxis.
Okay.
But the wisdom deity is the ultimate goal. That's the fully enlightened being that reveals the true nature of reality.
So you start with a more accessible deity and work your way up to the real deal.
Exactly. It's like training wheels before you can ride the full-blown cosmic bicycle.
That's a great analogy. I'm also curious about these yoginis and hikinis mentioned in the book. Who are these figures and what role do they play?
They embody this feminine principle of wisdom and energy.
Okay.
And they're often depicted as powerful beings who bestow bliss and enlightenment. It's fascinating how they challenge those traditional patriarchal views of spirituality by highlighting the importance of feminine power in the tantric path.
I'm loving how this tradition embraces both the masculine and feminine energies.
It's about recognizing that both are essential.
It really speaks to that idea of balance and wholeness that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's move on to something that might sound a bit more esoteric. Subtle energy yoga.
All right.
What is subtle energy and how do you yoga it?
Okay, so think of subtle energy as this life force that flows through your body. The energy that animates you, connects you to the universe. It's often described in terms of channels, winds, and drops, like a weather report for your inner world.
Channels, winds, and drops. Okay, that does sound a bit like a weather report for my insides. Can you break that down a little bit more?
So imagine your body has these energy channels, like rivers, and the winds are like the movement of energy through those channels, and then the drops are like these concentrated points of energy. So subtle energy yoga works with this system to awaken those dormant potentials within you.
So it's about clearing those energy pathways and allowing this life force to flow freely.
That's it.
Okay.
And the central channel, which runs along your spine, is especially important. That's considered the path to enlightenment.
I see.
So by working with your subtle energies, you can actually ignite that inner fire, generating inner heat and bliss.
Okay, so it's like stoking the furnace of your spiritual energy.
Exactly. You're creating a powerful transformation from the inside out.
I like that. All right, now on to the topic I think we've all been waiting for. Maybe not sexual yoga.
Here we go.
This is the part that often raises eyebrows and sparks a lot of curiosity.
Yeah.
What's the real story with sexual yoga in Tantric Buddhism?
Well, it's essential to remember that this practice is done with very specific intentions and in a specific context. So while pleasure is a part of it, it's not about simply having sex for fun.
Okay.
The goal is to use sexual energy as fuel for spiritual growth.
Okay, so not your average date night. Can you tell me more about the techniques involved?
Sure. It's best learned from a qualified teacher, of course.
Of course.
But the book does mention techniques like controlling the breath, visualizing specific energies, and working with a partner to kind of transform that sexual energy into spiritual energy.
And the belief is that this can lead to enlightenment. It seems pretty counterintuitive to what a lot of spiritual paths teach, right?
Yeah, the tantric texts do suggest that it can. They see sexual energy as the most powerful energy in the human body. So by mastering it, you can achieve these profound states of awareness and liberation.
It's like we were talking about before. It's that high-octane fuel that can really propel you forward on this path.
Exactly. But it needs to be handled with care.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered Deity Yoga, subtle energy yoga, and sexual yoga. Now let's talk about the final yoga, non-dual yoga, or Mahamudra. What does it mean to experience non-dual awareness?
This is the culmination of the path. Mahamudra is about transcending that illusion of separation, the idea that you're this separate self, distinct from the world. It's directly experiencing the unity of all things.
So no more me versus them, no more subject-object duality. So I understand correctly, reaching enlightenment through the genitals is not just a metaphor in this tradition.
You got it. It's
Right.
realizing that everything is interconnected, everything is ultimately one. It's about seeing through the illusions of your thoughts and emotions to that pure awareness that's always present.
That's pretty mind-blowing. So how does one actually achieve this non-dual awareness?
It's a gradual process of purification and realization involving all four yogas that we've talked about. So through those practices, working with the deities, cultivating subtle energies, and transforming sexual energy, you can gradually dissolve the mental obscurations that create that illusion of separation.
Like polishing a mirror until it reflects reality perfectly.
Exactly. And when you reach non-dual awareness, you experience the world as a manifestation of primordial wisdom and bliss. It's quite a profound shift in perception.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Ancient origins, these powerful deities, subtle energies, and sacred sex. I mean, Tantric Buddhism is a complex path, but what does it actually look like in practice? Like, how do these yogas come together in a more tangible way?
Right. That's where the sakana comes in. Think of it as a ritual manual. It's like your step-by-step guide for working with a specific deity and embodying its qualities.
Like a recipe for spiritual awakening.
Exactly. And this particular sadhana focuses on the deity Vajrayogini.
Amorous play. Okay, things just got interesting again. So what do we actually do in this sadhana? Like, are we trying to become Vajrayogini?
In a way, yes. It involves visualization, mantra recitation, and yogic practices to invoke her presence, connect with her energy, and merge with her enlightened awareness.
Okay, so it's about tapping into the power of the divine feminine for spiritual transformation. All right, let's break it down. What's the first step?
The sadhana starts with these preliminary practices. Think of it like setting the stage.
Okay.
Preparing your mind and body. You might take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, cultivate loving kindness and compassion, and kind of purify your motivation. It's like stretching before a workout, but for your spirit.
Okay. What comes next?
Then you move into the main part of the sadhana. It's typically divided into two stages, the creation stage and the completion stage.
Okay, 2 stages. What's the difference?
The creation stage is about visualizing yourself as the deity. So you create this really detailed mental image of Vajrayogini, including like everything, her color, her hand gestures, even the environment she's in.
So it's like painting a really detailed portrait in your mind. What about the completion stage?
The completion stage takes that visualization even further.
Okay.
Instead of just imagining yourself as the deity, you're merging your awareness with her enlightened consciousness.
So you're transcending the limitations of your ordinary self and accessing the wisdom and bliss of the deity. Okay, that sounds pretty advanced. What kind of practices are involved in reaching that level of merging?
This is where the other yogas we discussed, the subtle energy yoga and sexual yoga, become really important. The completion stage might involve working with your subtle energy system, channeling sexual energy, and dissolving all sense of separation into non-dual awareness.
We're really getting into the depths of this now. The book mentions something called ritual nudity. Is that what it sounds like?
It is. In many tantric practices, nudity symbolizes purity, vulnerability, a return to that primal state of being. It's about shedding your inhibitions and embracing the sacredness of your body.
So it's not about being like sexy or provocative.
Not at all. It's about recognizing the divinity within you, seeing your body as a temple, and approaching the practice with reverence and respect.
Okay, that makes sense. The book also talks about creating this sacred space for practice. What does that involve?
It could be a quiet corner in your home or a dedicated altar room. The key is to create a space that feels special, free from distractions, and conducive to meditation. You might use things like candles, incense, images of the deity, other sacred objects to enhance the atmosphere.
So setting the mood is important. It makes sense since this is a practice of embodiment, of connecting with the senses.
Exactly. Creating that beautiful and inspiring environment can really deepen your experience and support your spiritual journey.
All right, I'm ready to hear about the actual practice now. What are some of the steps involved in the creation stage of this sadhana?
First, you purify your motivation. Make sure you're approaching the practice with the sincere desire for enlightenment and the benefit of all beings.
So it's not just about your own personal enlightenment?
Right. In Tantric Buddhism, compassion is key. You're seeking liberation for yourself and for all beings.
That's beautiful. What happens next?
Next, you generate bodhicitta, the aspiration to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. It's considered the heart of the Mahayana Buddhist path, and it's essential in Tantric practice too.
So you're connecting with this deep sense of love and compassion for all living creatures.
Exactly. That motivation fuels your practice and gives you strengths to stay on the path.
Okay, we've purified our motivation, taken refuge, and generated bodhicitta. What's the next step?
Now it's time to invoke the deity. You visualize Vajrayogini in front of you, recite her mantra, and make offerings to her.
Offerings? Like what?
They could be physical offerings, like flowers, incense, food, or they could be mental offerings, like offering your virtues or your practice. It's a way of showing respect and devotion to the deity.
Like you're welcoming a guest into your home, making them feel honored and appreciated.
Yes, and by making offerings, you cultivate generosity and let go of attachment.
Okay, we've invoked the deity. Now, how do we actually become her in the visualization?
This is where those details are important. The sadhana describes Vajrayogini's appearance in detail: her color, ornaments, the objects she holds, her facial expression. It's like a blueprint for your visualization.
So you're using this description to create that vivid mental image, focusing on each detail to really bring her to life in your mind. And as you do this, you're reciting her mantra.
Right. The mantra is key. It's a sacred sound or phrase that carries her energy. By repeating it, you connect with her energy and invoke her presence.
So it's like dialing her number on the cosmic phone. I like that. And as you visualize and recite the mantra, you start to feel her presence more strongly.
Exactly. You might feel a shift in your energy, a sense of warmth or bliss, maybe even a vision of her appearing before you.
That sounds pretty intense. What happens next?
Once you have that strong connection, you move into self-generation. This is where you visualize yourself transforming into Vajrayogini.
So you're not just picturing her, you're actually becoming her.
Exactly. You start by visualizing your body dissolving into light. Then you rebuild it as the deity, piece by piece.
Like a spiritual Lego set.
Yeah, I like that. You're using your imagination to construct your divine form, aligning your body, energy, and mind with the enlightened qualities of Vajrayogini. And you continue reciting the mantra throughout this whole process.
So the mantra is like the glue that's holding the whole practice together. It keeps you focused, connected to her energy, and helps dissolve any doubts.
Precisely. And that's where the creation stage ends. You rest in that state of divine embodiment, feeling her presence within you. The deeper you feel it, the more powerful the practice becomes.
Okay, I'm ready for the completion stage. What comes next?
This is where things get even more subtle and profound. The completion stage involves dissolving that sense of separation and merging your awareness with ultimate reality.
So you go from becoming the deity to actually experiencing her enlightened consciousness.
Exactly. And this involves working with a subtle energy system, channeling sexual energy, and realizing the non-dual nature of reality.
This is where it gets really fascinating for me. Could you explain how subtle energy yoga connects with the process of dissolving that sense of separation in the completion stage?
One common practice is subtle energy yoga, which involves visualizing energy moving through your body, focusing on specific energy centers, or working with your breath to generate inner heat and bliss.
Like that inner weather report we talked about earlier.
Yes. You become aware of the subtle energies flowing through you and learn to direct them towards enlightenment.
And what about sexual yoga? How does that fit into the completion stage?
This is where things get even more interesting. Sexual yoga, or karma mudra, uses sexual energy to fuel your spiritual growth. It can involve visualizing specific deities during sexual union, working with your breath and subtle energies to enhance bliss, and dissolving all sense of separation into the unity of non-dual awareness.
This is definitely not your average Tantra class.
No, it's not. Remember, this is a sacred practice done with specific intentions and context. It's not about indulging in pleasure, but about using that energy to awaken your true nature.
So it's about channeling that high-octane fuel we talked about toward enlightenment.
Exactly. When practiced correctly, sexual yoga can be a powerful tool for transformation.
Okay, we've talked about subtle energy yoga and sexual yoga. What about Mahamudra? How does that fit in?
Mahamudra, or non-dual yoga, is the culmination of the path. It's about realizing the true nature of your mind, the awareness that's always present, beyond thoughts, emotions, and even the sense of self.
So it's about going beyond the chatter of your mind and tapping into a deeper level of awareness.
Exactly. Through the practices in the completion stage, you dissolve those mental obscurations that prevent you from experiencing non-dual awareness.
This is a lot to process. I'm seeing how all these yogas, Deity Yoga, subtle energy yoga, sexual yoga, and Mahamudra come together to create this powerful path. What kind of experiences can someone expect from practicing this sadhana?
The experiences can vary greatly depending on the individual and their practice level. Some might experience intense bliss, visions of light, or profound peace. Others might have more subtle experiences, like increased clarity, a deeper connection to their emotions, or a greater sense of purpose.
So there's no one-size-fits-all experience. It seems like being open to whatever arises is an important part of the process.
You're right, openness is key. It's about trusting the process and allowing the practice to unfold in its own way.
This has been incredibly insightful. We've covered a lot of ground, from the basics of Tantric Buddhism to the details of a specific sadhana. But before we move on, what about the potential challenges of this path? The book mentions that Tantric practice can be dangerous if done incorrectly. What are some of the risks?
You're right, there are risks. Misunderstanding the role of desire is a big one. Tantric Buddhism isn't about indulging every craving. It's about transforming desire and channeling it toward enlightenment. If you get caught up in seeking pleasure for its own sake, you can actually create more suffering.
So it's a delicate balance between embracing desire and using it to fuel spiritual growth. It seems like guidance is crucial for navigating those nuances.
Exactly. It requires discipline, discernment, and a good teacher. Another risk is practicing these techniques without proper preparation or guidance.
This isn't something you just pick up from a weekend workshop.
Definitely not. These practices are powerful and they can be destabilizing if you're not ready. Finding a qualified teacher is essential.
Okay, we've covered the creation stage, the completion stage, and the potential challenges. But there's another piece of the puzzle: community.
You're right. The book emphasizes the importance of practicing within a supportive community, particularly for sexual yoga.
So it's not just about you and your partner.
Not necessarily. Traditionally, these practices were often done in groups, with experienced practitioners guiding newcomers.
I can see how that would create a sense of safety and accountability.
It does, and it fosters a shared purpose, collective energy, and mutual support. It's about creating a container for transformation.
This deep dive has been quite a ride. We've explored this fascinating world of Tantric Buddhism, from the philosophy and practices to the potential pitfalls. I'm starting to see how this tradition offers a unique and powerful path. But what does it look like to live a tantric lifestyle? How do these practices translate into daily life?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. We'll move beyond the sadhana and explore how these practices can transform your relationships, your work, and your entire way of being in the world.
All right, I'm definitely ready for part 2. Let's continue this exploration and see how we can bring these ancient teachings into our modern lives.
Welcome back. So we just explored some of the foundations of Tantric Buddhism. The 4 yogas, the role of deities, the whole idea of sacred sexuality. Now let's really dig into the sadhana of secret Vajrayogini and see how it all comes together.
I'm ready to unlock those secrets. But first, can you just remind me what a sadhana is and why it's so important in this tradition?
Think of a sadhana as like a roadmap to enlightenment,
Yep.
a step-by-step guide for working with a specific deity and really embodying its qualities. It's like a musical score for your spiritual symphony.
That's a great way to put it. So this particular sadhana focuses on the deity Vajrayogini. What can you tell me about her?
Vajrayogini is a powerful yogini, a female embodiment of wisdom and bliss. Her name actually translates to the secret adamantine lady of amorous play.
Amorous play. Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. So what are we actually doing in this sadhana? Are we trying to become Vajrayogini?
You could say that. The sadhana involves visualization, mantra recitation, and yogic practices to really invoke her presence, connect with her energy, and ultimately merge with her enlightened awareness. It's about tapping into that power of the divine feminine to fuel your own transformation.
Okay, so let's walk through this sadhana step by step. What's the first thing we do?
It all begins with these preliminary practices. These are the practices that set the stage, create a sacred space, and prepare your mind and body. You might take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, cultivate loving kindness and compassion, and kind of purify your motivation.
So it's like stretching before a workout, but for your spirit.
Exactly.
Okay, so what comes after that?
Next, you move into the main body of the sadhana. It's usually divided into 2 stages, the creation stage and the completion stage.
Okay, 2 stages. What makes them different?
So the creation stage is all about visualizing yourself as the deity. You use your imagination to create this really vivid mental image of Vajrayogini with all her attributes, her color, her hand gestures, her ornaments, even the environment she's in.
So you're basically painting a detailed portrait in your mind and using your imagination to embody her.
Exactly.
Okay, so what happens in the completion stage?
In the completion stage, you take that visualization a step further. You're not just imagining yourself as the deity, you're merging your awareness with her enlightened consciousness. It's about transcending your ordinary self and accessing her wisdom and bliss.
That sounds pretty advanced. What are some of the practices that can help someone reach that level of merging?
That's where those other yogas, subtle energy yoga and sexual yoga, come in. The completion stage might involve techniques for working with your subtle energy system, channeling sexual energy, and ultimately dissolving any sense of separation into non-dual awareness.
The book also mentions ritual nudity. Is that really part of this practice?
Yes, it is. In many tantric practices, nudity is seen as a symbol of purity, vulnerability, a return to that primal state of being. It's about shedding your inhibitions and embracing the sacredness of your body.
So it's not about being like, sexy or provocative. It's more about recognizing the divinity within and approaching this with reverence and respect.
You got it. It's about seeing your body as a temple.
Okay. The book talks about creating a sacred space for this practice. What would that look like?
It could be something as simple as a quiet corner in your home or as elaborate as a dedicated altar room. The key is to create a space that feels special, conducive to meditation, free from distractions. You might use, candles, incense, images of the deity, other sacred objects to create the right atmosphere.
So setting the mood is an important part of the practice.
Absolutely. Remember, this is a practice of embodiment, of connecting with the senses. Creating a beautiful and inspiring environment can really deepen your experience and support your journey.
Okay, so let's talk about the steps in the creation stage of this sadhana. What happens first?
The first step is to purify your motivation. Ensure that you're approaching the practice with a sincere desire for enlightenment, not just for yourself, but for the benefit of all beings.
So compassion is woven into the very fabric of this practice.
Exactly. Then you formally take refuge in the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, kind of affirming your commitment to the path of awakening.
Okay, so what comes next?
You generate bodhicitta, the aspiration to reach enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. This is a core part of Mahayana Buddhism, and it's essential in tantric practice as well.
So you're connecting with this deep sense of love and compassion for all living creatures.
That's right. And that motivation fuels your practice, helps you stay the course.
Okay, so we've purified our motivation, taken refuge, and generated bodhicitta. What's next?
Now it's time to invoke the deity. You visualize Vajrayogini in front of you, recite her mantra, and make offerings to her.
What kind of offerings?
They could be physical things like flowers, incense, food, or they could be mental offerings like offering your virtues or your practice. It's a way of showing respect and devotion to the deity.
It's like you're welcoming an honored guest into your home.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
And by making offerings, you're cultivating generosity and letting go of attachment.
Okay, we've invoked the deity. Now, how do we actually become her in the visualization?
This is where the details from the sadhana are important. It will provide a description of Vajrayogini's appearance. Her color, her ornaments, the object she holds, her expression. You use that to build a vivid mental image, focusing on each detail to really bring her to life in your mind.
And as you do this, you're also reciting her mantra.
Yes. The mantra is a key element. It's a sacred sound or phrase that carries her energy. By repeating it, you connect with her energy and invoke her presence.
So it's like dialing her number on the cosmic phone.
Right.
Okay, and as you visualize and recite the mantra, you start to feel her presence more and more.
Right. You might experience a shift in your energy, a feeling of warmth, bliss, maybe even a vision of her.
That sounds like a really powerful experience. What happens next?
Once you have that strong connection, you move into what's called self-generation. You visualize yourself transforming into Vajrayogini.
So you're not just picturing her, you're actually becoming her.
Exactly. You start by visualizing your body dissolving into light, then you rebuild it in the form of the deity, piece by piece.
Okay, now I'm picturing a spiritual Lego set.
I like that. You're using your imagination to build your divine form and align your body, energy, and mind with the enlightened qualities of the deity. And throughout this, you're still reciting the mantra.
So the mantra is like this thread that weaves the entire practice together. It keeps your mind focused, connects you to the deity's energy, and helps to clear away any doubts or distractions.
Exactly. That brings us to the end of the creation stage. At this point, you rest in that state of divine embodiment, really feeling the presence of the deity within you.
So it's not just about going through the motions, it's about embodying the experience.
Exactly. The more you can feel her presence, the more powerful the practice.
All right, I'm ready to hear about the completion stage. What happens next?
This is where things get even more profound. The completion stage is about dissolving the illusion of separation and merging your awareness with ultimate reality. It involves practices like subtle energy yoga, channeling sexual energy, and ultimately realizing the non-dual nature of reality.
So in the completion stage, we go from becoming the deity to actually experiencing her enlightened consciousness. Can you tell me a little bit more about the specific techniques used in the completion stage?
Sure, subtle energy yoga plays a key role. It might involve visualizing energy flowing through your body, focusing on specific energy centers, or using your breath to create inner heat and bliss.
It's like becoming aware of that inner weather report we were talking about earlier and learning to direct those energies towards enlightenment.
That's right.
What about sexual yoga? How does that fit into the completion stage?
This is where things get really interesting. Sexual yoga, or karma mudra, uses sexual energy to fuel your spiritual growth. It can involve visualizing specific deities during sexual union, working with the breath and subtle energies to enhance bliss, and ultimately dissolving all sense of separation into non-dual awareness.
This is definitely taking things to a whole new level.
It is, but remember, this is a sacred practice, and it's important to approach it with respect and the right intentions. It's not about indulging in pleasure for its own sake, but about using that energy as a catalyst for awakening.
It's like channeling that high-octane fuel we talked about towards enlightenment.
Precisely. And when practiced correctly, it can be an incredibly powerful tool for transformation.
Okay, so we've talked about subtle energy yoga and sexual yoga. What about Mahamudra? How does that fit into the completion stage?
Mahamudra, or non-dual yoga, is the culmination of the path. It's about realizing the true nature of your mind, the awareness that's always present beyond your thoughts and emotions.
So it's like going beyond the chatter of the mind and connecting with a deeper level of awareness. And the practices of the completion stage are designed to help dissolve the mental obscurations that block that awareness.
That's right. It's a gradual process of uncovering that pure awareness that's already within you.
This deep dive has been so fascinating so far. I'm starting to see how all these pieces of, deity yoga, subtle energy yoga, sexual yoga, and Mahamudra fit together to create this powerful path to enlightenment. But I'm curious, what does it actually feel like to practice this sadhana? Like, what kinds of experiences do people have?
The experiences can vary a lot, depending on the person and their level of practice. Some people may experience intense bliss, visions of light, or a profound sense of peace. Others might have more subtle experiences like increased clarity, a deeper connection to their emotions, or a stronger sense of purpose.
So there's no one right way to experience this.
Exactly. The key is to approach the practice with an open mind and a willingness to embrace whatever arises.
We've covered the creation stage and the completion stage in detail. But before we move on, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the potential challenges. The book mentions that tantric practice can be dangerous if done incorrectly. What are some of the risks involved?
You're right, there are risks. One is misunderstanding the role of desire. Tantric Buddhism is not about indulging in every craving. It's about transforming desire and directing it towards enlightenment. If you're just chasing pleasure, you might end up creating more suffering.
So it's about finding that balance between embracing desire and using it as fuel for spiritual growth.
Exactly. And that takes discipline, discernment, and most importantly, proper guidance. Another risk is diving into these practices without adequate preparation or guidance.
It's not something you just learn from a book or a weekend workshop, is it?
Definitely not. These practices are powerful, and they can be destabilizing if you're not ready. Finding a qualified teacher is essential.
Okay, so we've talked about the creation stage, the completion stage, and the potential challenges of this path. But there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to discuss: community.
You're right. The book emphasizes the importance of practicing within a supportive community, especially when it comes to sexual yoga.
So it's not just something you do on your own?
Not necessarily. Traditionally, these practices were often done in groups, with experienced practitioners guiding those who are new to the path.
I can see how that would, create a sense of safety and accountability.
It does. And it also fosters a sense of shared purpose, collective energy, and mutual support. It's about creating a container for transformation and growth.
This deep dive has taken us deep into the world of Tantric Buddhism. We've explored the philosophy, the practices, and even the potential pitfalls. I'm beginning to see how this tradition offers such a unique and powerful path to enlightenment. But I'm curious, what does it actually look like to live a tantric lifestyle? How do these practices translate into everyday life?
That's a great question. And it's something we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. We'll go beyond the sadhana and delve into the lived experience of Tantric Buddhism, exploring how these practices can impact your relationships, your work, and your entire way of being in the world.
All right, I'm ready for part 3. Let's see how we can bring these ancient teachings into our modern lives. Okay, so we've spent the last 2 parts of this deep dive really going deep into the history, the philosophy, the practices of Tantric Buddhism. From these powerful deities to sacred sexuality, it's been quite a ride. Now let's bring this ancient wisdom into our modern world. Like, how can we actually live these teachings?
Yeah, that's the real question, isn't it? How does any spiritual path actually translate into everyday life?
Right.
How can these practices transform not just our inner experience, but also how we interact with the world around us?
Right, exactly. I'm picturing myself chanting mantras while, sipping my green smoothie and having tantric sex. But I have a feeling it's a bit more than that, right?
It is a bit more than that. Tantric Buddhism is really about cultivating this kind of awareness and presence in everything you do, from the most mundane to the most extraordinary.
So it's about bringing that sense of sacredness, that interconnectedness and bliss that we've been talking about into all aspects of life.
Precisely. Whether you're washing dishes, having a conversation, or making love, the tantric approach is about being fully present, engaging all your senses, and experiencing the world with this sense of awe and wonder.
Okay, so I can see how that could be really transformative. Can you give me some more concrete examples of how these principles might actually show up in everyday life?
Sure. Let's start with relationships. Tantric Buddhism emphasizes conscious communication, deep listening, and honoring the divine in each other. It's about seeing your partner not just as a physical being, but as a reflection of that ultimate reality.
So you bring that same sense of reverence and devotion that you have for the deities into your relationships.
Yes. It can completely change how you interact with your partner. Instead of getting lost in arguments or power struggles, you approach each other with compassion, understanding, and a willingness to see things from their perspective.
That sounds like a really good recipe for a much more harmonious and fulfilling relationship. Is it only for romantic relationships, though?
No, not at all. This tantric approach can really enhance all of your interactions with family, with friends, with colleagues, even with strangers.
Mm-hmm.
It's about bringing that same awareness and interconnectedness into all your relationships.
This is starting to make a lot of sense. What about work? Can these tantric principles apply to our professional lives as well?
Absolutely. Remember, Tantric Buddhism is about bringing awareness and presence to everything you do. So whether you're writing a report, leading a meeting, or creating art, it's about being fully engaged, tapping into your creative energy, and finding that joy in the process.
So you're saying it's possible to turn your work into a spiritual practice, even those those more mundane tasks.
You could say that it's about finding that flow state where you're fully immersed in what you're doing. Your mind is clear, and you're tapping into this deeper source of creativity and inspiration.
That sounds amazing. But let's be realistic. Most jobs aren't exactly conducive to spiritual bliss. How do you actually apply these principles when you're stuck in traffic or dealing with a difficult client or facing a mountain of paperwork?
That's where mindfulness comes in.
Yeah.
Tantric Buddhism really emphasizes the importance of being present.
Yeah.
Regardless of the circumstances.
So even in the midst of all the chaos, you're finding that stillness and awareness.
Exactly. Instead of getting carried away by stress or frustration, you practice observing your thoughts and emotions without judgment. Bringing your attention back to the present moment.
This sounds a lot like meditation.
It is, and that's a key takeaway here. The practices you learn in the sadhana, the visualizations, the mantra recitation, the breath work. Those are all tools for cultivating mindfulness throughout your day.
So it's not about isolating your spiritual practice to just an hour of meditation each day. You're bringing those skills, that awareness into everything you do. It's really about transforming your whole life, isn't it?
Yes. And that's what makes the tantric path so powerful. It's not about escaping the world. It's about engaging with it in a new way, with more awareness, compassion, and joy.
I'm seeing how that shift in perspective can make a huge difference. But what about the tough stuff? Like illness, loss, even death. How does Tantric Buddhism address those realities?
It doesn't shy away from them. Tantric Buddhism acknowledges the impermanence of life, the inevitability of suffering, and the reality of death. But instead of seeing these as reasons to despair, it encourages us to embrace them as part of the natural cycle.
It's about accepting those experiences rather than resisting them.
Exactly. And it's about finding meaning and beauty in those experiences.
Yeah.
For example, when faced with illness, the tantric approach might involve practicing self-compassion, visualizing healing energy, or using mantra recitation to transform suffering into wisdom.
That's a powerful way to look at it. What about death? How does Tantric Buddhism approach the end of life?
It sees death not as an ending, but as a transition. And the practices of Tantra can help you prepare for that transition, cultivating fearlessness, acceptance, and even a sense of joyful anticipation for what lies beyond.
That's such a different perspective than what most of us are taught.
It is. And it reminds us that Tantric Buddhism is more than just a set of practices. It's a way of life, a way of seeing the world, and a way of approaching every experience from the ordinary to the profound with awareness, with compassion, and a deep sense of connection to the sacred.
This deep dive has been such a journey. We've explored, the history, the philosophy, and the practices of Tantric Buddhism, from powerful deities to sacred sexuality. We've seen how those ancient teachings can be woven into our modern lives, transforming our relationships, our work, and our entire way of being in the world.
And this is just the beginning, really. There's so much more to uncover on the path of Tantric Buddhism.
Exactly. I mean, we've given you a taste, but the real exploration begins when you start experimenting with these practices yourself. Feel their effects, discover what they reveal about the nature of reality and the potential for awakening within you.
So we encourage you to keep exploring, to keep questioning, and most importantly, keep experiencing the world with that tantric sense of wonder and possibility.
You might just discover that the path to enlightenment is a lot more joyful and exciting than you ever imagined. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep seeking, keep growing, and keep embracing the bliss that's always available to you.